We've been talking about the effects of the media in persuasion, and to finish up with that, just a couple of more frames, the issue of agenda control. And this is described by our book as efforts that the media have, that they make to select certain events and certain topics that emphasize certain issues that they believe are important, and that kind of shapes what people are thinking about and what people think are important. Now, this is an interesting frame from your textbook, The Hostile Media Phenomenon, and it calls to mind a lot of the comments that I hear through the discussion board when we talk about the effects of the media and the topics that they choose to report on, whether it's the bad news phenomenon or whether it's promoting a particular social perspective or the slant that they want to put on it. And I get a lot of comments from students that when they watch the news, for instance, they see the different news shows are biased. And it's interesting, this particular box is interesting to read through because it tells us that no matter who you are and what perspective you have, you can watch the same program as somebody that has a diametrically opposite view of the world that you have, and maybe the opposite political party. And you can both come away saying that the report was biased because we tend to view the information as biased. One of the ideas this box talks about is that when news agencies try to present a fair and balanced representation of an issue, showing both sides of any controversy, that individuals that watch it tend to notice information that supports their own stance, but they also notice information that goes against it. And because they notice the information that goes against it, that's what they focus on, and they assume then that the report is biased because it talks about two sides of the issue rather than just one. And then another interesting piece to this box is during the 1980 U.S. presidential election, they did a telephone survey before the election. And they had Jimmy Carter supporters who felt that the media had favored one candidate over its coverage. 83% thought it favored Reagan. And in contrast to that, the Reagan supporters that they polled felt that the media had been biased, and that 96% felt that the media had favored Carter. So it ends with kind of a humorous note here. One thing we can all agree on: the media is biased. So beware of that when you're viewing information, especially news information. Sometimes we tend to derogate information that doesn't fit in with our personal beliefs, and then assumed that it's a biased report, that when in fact it might actually not be. So, attentional biases and resistance. People can be resistant to persuasion because of pre-existing biases, commitments, and knowledge. They selectively attend to and evaluate information according to their original attitudes, tuning into what supports their attitude and beliefs, and then tuning out or derogating whatever contradicts them. So, for instance, this has the example of a study that found that among students that favored legalizing marijuana, they prefer to listen to strong arguments in favor of that position, or to arguments against their position that were easy to refute. So they did not prefer to listen to anti-legalization information that was hard to refute. So this kind of echoes what I just said. Another example, people who were presented with results of studies favoring or opposing their position on the death penalty believed that the studies that supported their position, they believed those studies, but they questioned the studies that didn't. So they thought they were less valid if they didn't support their position. The concept that relates to this from our textbook is called selective evaluation. And it's the idea that people are personally motivated to pay attention to information that supports their cherished beliefs, but to derogate information that challenges them. Some other thing that can add to resistance to persuasion is previous commitments. So our attitudes are tied very closely to our social identity. And we've talked a lot about how the concept of consistency, wanting to stay consistent, holds us, kind of ties us to our attitudes, our current attitudes, so that can make us resistant to change or to persuasion. And when we make our commitments publicly, that really strengthens our commitments to our beliefs and our stances. So that makes them more resistant to change as well. For instance, publicly discussing or announcing your opinion will make it much more resistant to change, because we want to have that consistent self-concept. This is actually a good tool to use if you want to make some kind of a big change in your life, like quitting a bad habit, like for instance smoking. You can, or maybe eating the wrong kinds of foods. If you actually have a discussion with people and tell people about what your intention is and why you're doing it, it can actually strengthen your resolve to be able to change and make more healthy choices. Thought polarization is another reason why persuasion can be resisted. So this is the hypothesis that the more you think about a particular issue and your beliefs around it, the more strongly you're going to believe about that, the more of an entrenched attitude you're going to have. This extends to when we talk about groups, there's also group polarization. So if you hang out with people with like minds, people that have similar beliefs as yours, you're likely to just strengthen your own beliefs. And sometimes that's good. Other times maybe it's not, because then you don't get another person's perspective that might have had an opposite type of experience that formed their beliefs. Knowledge and resistance knowledge can add to resistance. So the more we know, the more information we have about a situation, a stance, the more resistant we are to change. So having greater knowledge means that we have good counter arguments to defend our attitude. And that leads us to the phenomenon of attitude inoculation. Number 31 on your study guide asks, how can attitude inoculation guard against persuasion? How can it make you more resistant to it? Well, attitude inoculation here is defined as small attacks on people's beliefs that engage their pre-existing attitudes, prior commitments, and background knowledge, enabling them to counteract a subsequent larger attack and thus resist persuasion. For instance, one study asked teens to come up with counter-arguments to reasons why they should smoke. So maybe some examples of arguments against not smoking might be, oh, everyone else is doing it. So first they make a list of, how would someone else convince you to smoke? Everyone else is doing it. Smoking increases my status. I can fit in with the group. Smoking is cool. And not everyone's health is affected by smoking. So those are some of the persuasive arguments that peers might make to convince you to continue to smoke or to smoke at all. In the inoculation process, the idea is to come up with counter arguments to those arguments. So in regard to everyone else is doing it, maybe everyone else isn't doing it. Maybe this group over here isn't. And in fact, maybe there's a lot of restaurants you can't go to. And in Colorado, we know that we have laws that make it so that we can't smoke inside of a restaurant. So it can actually exclude you rather than include you into a group. Makes it so it's not so cool. So coming up with counter arguments actually increases the chances that people are going to be able to resist being persuaded against their belief. Here's another example of inoculation, attitude inoculation. This was a study done by McGuire and Papagorakis in 1961. So in this study, here we go, participants were exposed to a truism, and in this case, one of the truisms was, it's a good idea to brush your teeth after every meal. And then they had another statement that attacked that truism, which was too frequent brushing can damage your gums and expose your teeth to possible decay. So this represents people supported the truism before they were exposed to that attack. And this green bar represents their support of truism when they weren't exposed to any attack at all. This group represents the inoculation defense group, where they were given that attack and they were asked to write out as many counter arguments as they could against that attack. And then this last group represents people that were not exposed to an attack at all, but they were asked to write a supportive defense for the truism. So in other words, write out as many reasons as you can about why it is important to brush your teeth after every meal. And you can see that the highest support after that initial rating of support for the truism was amongst the group that was inoculated, so that they had those counter arguments readily available, and their positions then were much more resistant to change. So the effect of inoculation can really strengthen our conviction and certainty about our existing attitudes, and it's a good way to get people to dig in their heels and become more confident about their position, is to give them lousy counter arguments about their beliefs.